Thank you. Great. Now I gotta follow you like I'm on after James Brown now.
But I have to just say, Mark wrote a piece recently in the LA Times. If you haven't read it, you must go search it. It made me cry. He gave an analogy. Maybe I should let you well, I'm gonna say it, because if I can not cry talking about it, because this is the other big elephant in the room that has emerged just recently about casting. And he said, if you give a child 100 toys and you take one away, that kid is probably going to be okay unless he or she is really spoiled. If you give a child one toy and you take that away, what does that do? And that was just the perfect way to describe why people don't freaking get it. Like, how could they not get it? But I think after reading that, they get it. And I really have to thank Mark for writing that piece. Can you discuss there's two things I really want to ask you. You are African American, as most people could tell, and the Oscars show created a little tension because in our reaction to those jokes, inevitably it looked like we were criticizing choices made by certain African American people on the show and behind the scenes, et cetera, et cetera. And then to also discuss the relationship of the Oscars So White, which is really Movies So White, to what you were talking about in terms of casting. I think it's all related, and we need to battle this. We need to tackle this issue. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
The Oscars they're always a weird thing. The Oscars are this weird bastard form of entertainment that we all tune into despite the fact that we have no real rooting interest in. Except for this year, with, Oscars So White Part 2, the whitening. The African American community was very just charged by the idea that Chris Rock was going to stare this down, into the barrel, like go head at it. And he did, and there was a kind of a groundswell of pride, especially if you went on Twitter and you saw the conversations. The idea that you could speak that kind of truth to that power in that room, where Chris Rock is one of 18 black dudes in that room, telling all of these rich white people what their problems are. And it's a bold thing to do, and we were absolutely, yeah, go Chris Rock, we love you. And then a thing happened where we realized that Oscars So White it wasn't a polar opposite thing. It wasn't Oscars So White and then Oscars need to be black. It's that Oscars just need to stop being so white. That leaves a lot of doors open for other people to feel like they have a part in the conversation, to feel like they have a place in cinema history. And I did a roundtable when I was at the Hollywood Reporter with Alan Yang, who's the showrunner for Master of None, Stephanie Elaine, who produced Boys in the Hood, of all things, as well as she was a Columbia exec for a very long time, and Justin Simien, who made a film called Dear White People. And I asked them what the important part about the Oscars was. Like, given that Fast and the Furious is a franchise that now makes billions of dollars year-round. Like, at the time, Ride Along 2 had just opened to $70 million at the box office. Like, in the hearts and minds of the audience, they are totally on board with us being a part of that conversation. And to a person, they all said, yeah, but that's not us looking at us. That is not the movie's establishment rewarding us for our good work. And that's what's important. And so when, at the biggest night of cinema, on the stage that millions of people around the world are watching, for Chris Rock to make not only ill-advised and ill-conceived jokes, but not funny jokes at Asian American expense, just felt like somebody else needed to have that second thought. There needed to be that other person in the room to say, really? Like, really? Like, in a year we're talking about diversity, you have to talk about diversity. You have to realize that it is not just a black and white issue, that it is a thing for everybody. It's a thing for every kid who's at home who gets to look at the Oscars and say, hey, maybe I can make movies someday. And then be told, well, actually, no, you can't. That's why that's important, and that's where I felt, Chris Rock sort of dropped the ball a little bit. And as far as the idea of racial erasure or the whitewashing of characters, it absolutely fundamentally goes back to that idea that if you don't see yourself in media, then why do you think you have the right to make that media? You know, I'm a storyteller by heart, and I want to tell the best stories that one can, be it on TV, be it in print, be it, you know, trying to follow George Takei as he breaks my heart next to him. And vast piece of the puzzle that is the world, because you don't think it'll sell, you know, because you think you need to put Scarlett Johansson in your movie because an Asian actress wouldn't bring people to the table, is ludicrous. The idea that you could take a character who is fundamentally written to be Asian and decide, well, Tilda Swinton is weird, so yeah, I guess. You know, like, it is damaging in a fundamental way that Hollywood all too often doesn't notice, that they just don't think about, that they just don't factor in. Because again, the only color they really care about is green. But as time goes on, and as we see China becoming the most dominant force in the box office, why would you leave money on the table? Why would you leave stories on the table? Why would you leave anything that's worthwhile on the table when it's sitting there on the table?